Hello, my friends, and thanks for joining us. Here we are again. You are at Kardec Radio, and this is Spiritism, a closer look. I'm Luiz Lima, your host. We do this program every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and we've been telling you this, we always encourage you to make your comments, bring your comments and questions and suggestions. Just go to kardecradio.com, or you can see our Facebook link down here. We are always open for new suggestions, comments, and questions too. And like you see here on the banner, you can always request a topic or a subject you would like us to take a closer look at, and we will do it. We will bring it because we are all learning. So when we do this with our friends and guests that occasionally come to the show here, we are all learning. So thank you very much for joining us. And tonight's topic is facts and perceptions. Why am I bringing this? Well, why did I decide to do a closer look into facts and perceptions? Overall, I think by understanding what they are exactly and what the differences are between them under the Spiritist light, it, 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 it tells us, or it can teach us how to better deal with the events and situations in our lives. A lot of times our perceptions are wrong. We look at facts and what we see is not what it really is, or uh, you and I look at the same fact and I have a certain perception, you have a different perception, we have different opinions. So all of these things can create situations that could potentially be not so good, to the extreme that we get into justice, and there's no justice, there's justice. So that's the overall goal tonight, to discuss a little bit about facts and perceptions. And to begin with, we are going to define fact. What is a fact? You can see down here, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, a fact is something that has actual existence. Okay. An actual occurrence. Okay. Also, a piece of information presented as having objective reality. It becomes a little more interesting. A piece of information. So, a fact is information of some sort. Information means it's just it's neutral. There's neutrality. It's just a piece of information presented as having objective reality. Objective reality means when you look at it and when I look at it, we see exactly the same thing. We think about the same thing. We consider this to be, uh, we analyze the same way. That's what a fact is. Piece of information is a very interesting definition by Merriam-Webster dictionary. A piece of information presented as having objective reality. Well, then we start to dig in a little bit. If it is objective reality, it automatically ties into our five senses, because that's how we perceive reality as incarnates, using our five senses. So this piece of information is not biased. It doesn't lean to any sides. It doesn't draw any conclusions. It just carries neutrality. That's what a fact is. And because of that reason, a fact is related to our material life rather than our spiritual life. Of course, as incarnates, we still have a spiritual life. We have emotions, we have our mindsets and everything else. That's not material. But when you say fact, it ties into our material life, which we perceive using our five senses. That is fact. Okay, now we're going to go to the other side. we tried to define what is a fact. Now we're going to talk a little bit about perception, and then we're going to start comparing things. What is a perception? Right? Perception here is not in the sense that a medium or a sensitive is perceiving some entity. It's not this. It's the plain word out of the dictionary, meaning it's something that it's an opinion that I have upon a fact. That's what a perception is. It's our take on something that has happened or is happening. It's how I look at it. It's my opinion. Here's a simple example. If I tell you there's a dog in the yard, for example, that's a plain fact. You can go to the yard and you're going to see a dog, and everybody else that goes to the yard will see that same dog. And I can tell you a little bit more. There's a black dog in the yard. When you go to the yard, there's a black dog. So there's no argument per se, because we all see the same thing. Now, if I tell you this, there's a small dog in the yard, that complicates a little bit, because not necessarily that dog is small for every single person. For me, I could consider a small dog for a person that for some reason is afraid of dogs, and that has to be respected, by the way. But for somebody who is afraid of dogs for whatever reason, it's never going to be small, because it's always a big deal. For people, for example, that have some sort of trouble with water because of whatever reason, a pool is always something frightening, is always something huge for them. So when I tell you there's a large dog or a small dog, this is my perception of what that dog is. I'm stamping my perception on it. For example, if there is a car accident, okay, on a crossroad, there's a car accident. Two cars, they hit each other. If I tell you there was a car accident this afternoon, for example, that's a fact. But if I tell you there was a car accident this afternoon and one of the guys was speeding a lot, that's my opinion. That's perception, because speeding or going fast, it's my perception. For a Formula One racer, he might have been very slow, by the way. So things get relative. When we start relating to our emotions, to our spiritual life, things and concepts become relative. A fact is not something relative to anything. It's an absolute statement. A perception is a statement. It's my statement upon that fact. Several things will affect and impact the way we perceive the world. Some for better, some for worse. Some will make us, have difficulties in certain areas of our lives. Certain will not. But here are some of these factors that will influence our perception. So we could kind of divide in two groups: material factors and spiritual or mental or emotional. So what would be material factors? For example, our body composition, which includes our organs of perception. So for example, if I have a certain eye trouble or eye problem. So let's just say I can't see very far unless I have my glasses. And I saw something on a certain day, but I didn't have my glasses. So I'm kind of almost guessing what I saw. I have to put my opinion without having my entire five senses properly aligned. It could be something that happens very fast. And if I'm blinking at the very moment, it might impact my perception. For example, if you go to a tennis game, right, and the ball goes really, really, really fast, these guys are able to do 100 miles an hour, 120 miles an hour. And if the ball hits the lines, At the very moment that he hits the lines, if I'm blinking, that's time enough for me to lose my exact perception if it was just outside the line or just inside. So I might have a wrong perception about it because of a limitation of my physical body, because my eyes have to blink every certain number of seconds. Another one, my neurotransmitters, they will impact my perception. Neurotransmitters are it's chemistry in our brains that will impact our perceptions. Our brain language is actually two languages, electrical and chemical. The electrical language never changes because that's electricity going through the neurons. But from one neuron to the next one, the information is passed along through neurotransmitters, which are uh, uh, quotes middlemen. So if my neurotransmitters, if my level of neurotransmitters is not what they're supposed to be, my perception can be troubled. So those are simple material factors that will impact my perception. Now there are other and many more on the other side of the thing, which is spiritually speaking, mentally speaking. What are some of the factors that will contribute to or influence, better saying, my perception? Number one, my spiritual history. Spiritual history means all these enormous sequences of lives that I've had been on, reincarnation after reincarnation, one after the other. I go around one after another building my spiritual history. That's what moral progress is all about, intellectual progress is all about. We come here several times to get better. And there's a history, there's traces that we leave behind, things that we did in the past and we don't do anymore, things that we did in the past and we're still doing today because we're still learning. So that baggage, that spiritual history that we bring in will impact performance, perception. I'm sorry. There are events from past lives, and sometimes way in the past, that I am still attached to the present day. I gave an example here. For example, somebody who is afraid of dogs. We don't know why. The person might not know why, but let's say that 3 lives ago, they had a really bad and traumatic experience with some sort of dog. And that's still alive in their spiritual history. It wasn't something that was offset yet. So that will matter. Number two, so spiritual history is one of them. Number two, cultural aspects. Where we live matters in general for our perceptions. We lean to one way or to another way or to a certain type of conclusion, to a certain type of analysis, depending on the culture that I'm inserted in. It will matter. Number three, thought. My thoughts will matter. So, for example, for the same physical event, a fact, for the same physical event, I can have a certain opinion today and a different opinion tomorrow for the same physical event because my thoughts yesterday were not the same thoughts of today. So when I look at this, in the past, my thoughts were different. My analysis, my outcome was a particular one. Today, I have a different thought altogether. I'm going to have a different outcome. Number four, spiritual influences. You know, Paul used to say, right? There's a cloud of spirits out there. They're all influencing us all the time. So if we have influences, especially those less advanced spirits or obsessors that will present themselves in our lives from time to time for certain people, yes, they will influence the way we see things. So people under dominance of obsessors, they will see things differently than those who are not. And another thing that matters in the perception, mediumship. Mediums are those who can uh, access the spirit world more easily than others, than non-mediums. And when that happens, they have to process a lot of ideas out there until they sync with the one they will have affinity with. So their perception, when they go out, and when they start their mediumship process, they will have to deal with that. So their perception can be, most likely, will be influenced by their mediumship. So perceptions are these, I would say, expressed opinions that we have. It's just an opinion. You see, when I tell somebody how they are, it doesn't make them that. It's just my opinion. You see, Jesus was here, right? And for 3 years, he was going all over the place, taking the great message around, Judea and so. He was perceived by many as a bad person. And they would tell him, "You're bad, we don't like you, we hate you," whatever they used to tell him. But that did not define who he was. See, my perception about somebody does not make that somebody what my perception wanted to be. As a matter of fact, it's very unlikely that's ever going to happen. So we cannot define people by our perception because they are just opinions. They will not be what I want them to be. They will be what they are. And I can't change that with my way of seeing things. So, for the same fact, we can have different perceptions. Go back to Jesus. For some, he was the greatest ever. For some, he had to go to the cross because he was such a bad guy. Same fact, different perceptions. Those guys were listening to him at the same time, at the same place. Some of them will say, this guy needs to go to the cross, and some will say, this is the greatest master ever. Same fact, different opinions. And why is that? Then we go into a different area. We transition to another concept, which is the concept of right and wrong. And that's where most of us, get in trouble. You see, for me to tell you that something is right or wrong, I have to give you also what the reference is. I can tell you, for example, you know, uh, all cars should be black. If your car is not black, it's not worth anything. That's absurd. And then you got to tell me, where is this written? What is the reference that you are using? And I'm going to have to say the reference is myself because I made this. I'm ruling the situation here. That's the reference. But your reference can be different. Your reference could be all blue cars are the greatest ever. Anything else is worth nothing. So you see, right and wrong depend on a reference. And the problem is, all of us in a planet of trials and expiations, we use our own references. We do not use, or rarely, we use the absolute reference, which is just one, and it's God. These are the laws of God. That is the absolute reference. You see, when 9/11 took place, there was I don't know if you follow on that day, if you were watching the news or whatever, on that day, not now, on that day, as it was taking place. The thing took place about 8:30 in the morning, Eastern time. throughout that one day, maybe for about 3 days, but especially throughout that one day, from let's just say 9 a.m. to all the way to when we all went to sleep. So for at least 12 hours, we were watching television and all most stations, especially news stations, they were talking about it. They were, you had the anchors, journalists, everybody was trying to say something to give their facts and opinions about that. And we were listening to these people talking, but the image on TV was some of the images that we had captured while the thing was happening. So we saw, unfortunately, we saw the plane coming to the towers and hitting the towers, exploding. And there was on and on and on and on because in the first hours, we did not have a lot of footage to display and show on television. So we had maybe about 5 minutes of footage that we were repeating and alternating with 5 minutes of those images, the footage, and then the anchor would come, show his face on television, say something, then we go back to 5 minutes of footage, then the anchor, then 5 minutes of footage. But the footage was all the same. So they ran a research in certain areas of the country on smaller kids, kids under 10 years old, what their feeling was on that day, what they thought that was. And the answer just struck me. A lot of kids thought it was a video game, that when the plane hits the tower, the game was over, it's going to start again. And then the plane comes again, hits the tower, game over, start again. That was their perception. You can see how off, per se, their perception is, because they were using a different reference. Their reality was not the same as us looking at those things and living throughout that day and the following days until U.S. government told, the television, get these images off because everybody's getting depressed, so stop showing those. And then we did. We stopped showing those. But for the days, the 2, 3, 4 days that we showed those, a lot of kids thought that was a video game. If you were to ask a terrorist, do you think what I'm doing is right? Do you think what you're doing is correct and right? They will get offended by your question. It will make no sense to them because from their perspective, of course they are right. So if we don't think it's right and they think it's right, us and them, we are not using the same reference. What is right for them is wrong for me. What is wrong for me, what is right for me, it's wrong for them. We are not using the same reference. Why? Because our perceptions are different. And why our perceptions are different? Because my reference is not the same as theirs. We are not using the universal absolute reference. So one interesting aspect of all of this is for less advanced spirits, I'm going to say that again. For less advanced spirits, perception is a fact. There is no difference between perfection and fact for less advanced spirits. They will think everything is all one. As they develop, as they advance morally, intellectually, the difference starts to appear when they are very advanced. There's no way to mix a fact with a perception. So we use personal references or tribal references, and they are variable. For example, if you go back 200 years in history, women could not do certain things in the society that they are allowed now. A lot of things, by the way. In other cultures, that didn't change. So for us, that reference changed. So our reference is variable. So by having and using variable references, it creates a sense of a floating justice, not absolute justice. So we will adapt justice according to our double standards, triple standards, whatever it is. That creates for us, it brings a lot of suffering because we are going against the most important law, the law of God. For example, perception about death. We incarnates perceive death in a certain way. Discarnates perceive death different. We don't use the same references, us and them. So you see, the idea of reality, reality itself is neutral. What defines what we think it's truth is our perception. It's our state of mind. It's who we are. It's our spiritual history. Perception is proprietary. It's mine. I cannot infuse my perception into your head. Perception is proprietary, but facts are collective. Like I said in the beginning, fact. The dog is out there in the yard. That's it. Collective. Everybody sees that. Now, when I tell you this dog is small, that might get me in trouble, depending on who's listening to me. So our perception is nothing more than our personal interpretation of the facts. And like I said, as we develop, as we advance morally and intellectually, and we develop our perception and we refine our perception, we approach the truth. More advanced spirits, good spirits, mentors, and so, they are a lot closer to the truth than less advanced spirits. That's very interesting. So until then, until we advance to a point that we are approaching the truth, getting close to be a pure spirit, until then, we have to deal with these: what is just, what is not. Is it justice or is it not? So, you see, in a wrap up thought, we could say that our perception directly affects our quality of life. The accuracy of a perception improves with the moral advancement. The less advanced the spirit is, the more perception become facts. The more centered we are, the more accurate our perfections are. We can't judge reality by our perception because we are always right according to ourselves. It is not reality, it is just my opinion. There's a very interesting thought that goes like this, more or less. If you go into a pool and try to use the pool as a mirror, so you put your face down, right, and you look at yourself. What happens? The water is moving. There are waves. So you can maybe recognize that it's you there, right? But it's complicated. It's difficult. It's not really a mirror. It will give you a wrong impression of who you are because you don't have your face all distorted and everything kind of moving. That's not reality. That's how you perceive through the quotes eyes of the moving water. A quiet mind. Quiet mind means for those spirits who have refined their perception, will use a real mirror, not moving water. So our perception, because of the planet that we are, which is adequate for people who need trials and expiation, and here we are, 8 billion incarnates and 20 some billion overall, our perception are influenced by all of these things. All of these things make the water move on the pool. So when I look at it, what I see is not what it is. So I wanted to bring this reflection to you. So just like myself, right? You can think about it. I think it's a very valid thing. I think it deserves, from our part, from us spiritists, it deserves a little bit more of attention to go deeper and understand a little bit more that I create my own reality. You create your own reality. They are not the same. How come they're not the same if we live in the same world? Because of our perceptions. They get filtered out by your spiritual history, my spiritual history, our baggage. So think about that. Guys, thank you so much. I appreciate your participation tonight. And once again, if you have a topic that you would like us to look at it, to take a closer look at, please let us know. Just go to kardecreator.com, or you can also go to our Spiritist, to our Facebook page. You see the link down here below, just below me, right here. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time. Be well.